Good morning, everyone. My name is Dawn Dole, and I am the Executive Director for the Taos Institute. Today is June 25th, 2020, and we are meeting and gathering today for our dialogue with the author. And today we have two authors that are going to be sharing their book with us, Pam Brett-MacLean and LianneMcTavish. And we are so excited to have them here with us today. The Taos Institute is a nonprofit educational organization. We have been around for 26 years, and we're really excited about the work we've done over the years and the networks we've created around the world. We are a global organization, and our focus is on social construction and relational practice and appreciative practices that really bring practitioners and academics and researchers together to explore new ways of being in the world together, whether it's a practice for change or therapy or community development or peace building or research. We're really focused on how we socially construct the world that we most want to live in and be in. And so today, the book that we're going to be exploring is Art+Medicine Collaborative Practice, Transforming the Experience of Head and Neck Cancer. And Pam and Lianne will be talking about the book and just really a lot of excitement around this book and how it came to be and what it's about. Pam is Associate Professor in Psychiatry and Director of the Arts and Humanities and Health and the Medicine program in the Faculty of Medicine and Dentistry at the University of Alberta. And Lianne is professor in the Department of Art and Design at the University of Alberta. She specializes in early modern visual culture, critical museum theory, and the history of the body. And again, I just want to invite everyone to go to the chat and put your name in there, where you are in the world, and one thing that drew you to this call. And also throughout the presentation, today it's going to be about an hour and a half. We're going to end at around 12:30 New York time. Feel free to put your questions and comments in the chat, and anything that comes to mind or other resources as we're going through the dialogue today, feel free to use the chat for that. So I think we're ready to start, and I am going to turn it over to Pam and Lianne. You can take yourself off mute.
Great, wonderful. Thank you for that introduction, Dawn, and thank you for inviting us. I'm so glad that Lianne and I opportunity to talk about this book that so many people contributed to. That's the outcome of a really wonderful project that we were invited to participate in. And this we were just talking about a short while ago. This has been 5 years in the making, this moment, which is really incredible to think about. Just before we begin, this book is the outcome of the project that was called See Me, Hear Me, Heal Me, that was envisioned and wonderfully realized as an amazing collaborative project by Min Yoon, who's on the call. I'd also like to recognize that we have other collaborators on this call. Now, I don't see everybody who's actually here, but I know Bernie Prisky is on the line. It's wonderful to have him. So perhaps we'll hear from him and others as well. But I wondered, Min, whether you would be, if you could outline the project that you conceptualized and helped to realize with all of us before we start talking about the book.
Perfect. First of all, thanks, Dawn and the Taos for giving us a platform to share the work here. And I do recognize that Bernie's here joined with Pat, his wife, and so we welcome both of them. And both of them had contributed to the book. So just to give you a little bit of a background as to how the project really started, I'm actually an associate professor with the School of Dentistry, and I had just a small interest in head and neck cancer at the very start of my academic career. And I didn't really quite know what the main topic area or the questions that I should be investigating. The perspective that I had as an investigator was I wanted to do something meaningful. And I had an opportunity to speak with a head and neck cancer patient who, rightly so, came forward and was so generous with her story. And I said, can you meet me at a local Starbucks, thinking that that would be a safe public place to engage in a conversation, and ordered her a coffee and sat down and began by listening to her story. And as I was madly jotting notes down and trying to get a perspective of a lived experience of head and neck cancer, we came to a close at the end of our conversation. And the one question that I asked was, in 5 or 10 years, what would you like to see? And my question came from a research lens, but what I was faced or what I was told kind of floored me. And her answer was, I'd like to go through a drive-through, be understood, and be able to actually drink the coffee. And it's at that one moment after this long conversation that I realized everything that I didn't realize coming into the conversation. And looking across the table, I saw an untouched coffee, and I realized the difficulty that the actual surrounding that I had invited her to was posing in terms of the noise and the difficulty speaking. And just the simple desires of what was important to her really kind of flooded me in that one moment. And so it began our journey of this project, where the most important thing that I figured was to really share the lived experience of head and neck cancer patients and what it meant for them as they engaged back into society, engaged in relationships with their families and with the healthcare system, and all of those little pieces, not little to undermine them, but the little things that often go unnoticed and that are hidden became so important. And I couldn't really quite do it justice, even through words and traditional narrative research. And that's really where the seeds of this interprofessional project or multidisciplinary project really came to fruition and really took a life of its own. And so that's really where we see all the various disciplines and the contemporary artists really coming in. Not as a conduit to communicate the lived experience, but really as a mode and medium for really engaging in some of the dialogue that we were hearing. And I'm sure Lianne and Pam are going to be talking more about that, but I just really wanted to give you a background on how this project started and really the importance of the unknown stories that we really wanted to highlight. So I take it back to you, Lianne and Pam.
Great. Okay, thank you, Lynn. So Lianne, if you could share your screen, and we'll go through some of the slides and start there. The first slide that we're going to share with you is the book. So once we get there. Lianne?
Yes.
I think these are the slides that I shared back with you.
Oh no.
Oh no.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Keep talking and I will find them.
Okay, great. Okay, so we're going to show you.
There it is. There it is.
Okay, great. I'm going to show you the book actually looks like. So this was the See Me, Hear Me, Heal Me project, which resulted in the Flux exhibition responding to the experience of head and neck cancer. And the book is now titled Art+Medicine Collaborative Practice, Transforming the Experience of Head and Neck Cancer. It represents a huge collaborative effort that evolved over time. We were learning ourselves. We had an idea of how to begin, We knew Min was fabulous in talking about this project and inviting people to work with her. And because she needed to draw on different expertise, the people with different backgrounds and abilities to actually bring this forward to execute what her vision was. Many of us didn't know each other from the very beginning, but came together and worked together through this process. Lianne will talk more about some of the collaborative aspects, but there was a point in time when people were becoming aware of some of the work that we were doing. And it turned out that we were nominated by an institute here at the University of Alberta for a CIHR, for those who are in the States, be similar to the NIH granting agency. CIHR is the Canadian Institutes of Health Research, and we were nominated for a Gold Leaf Prize for Transformation for the patient engagement model that we were developing through this work. That led us to having to articulate what we were actually doing as part of the application that we were invited to submit. So that will be the next slide, Lianne, just to show that that happened. We had a number of wonderful letters of endorsement. Ken Gergen, president of the Taos Institute, he provided a wonderful letter of support, relating it back to future forming, researchers future forming, and all the potentials of that, which I think was really, really aligned with what the intention of this project has been. So we'll move forward a little bit again. We have articulated some of what we began to outline in our CIHR application, and we didn't receive the prize. We were just grateful to be nominated for it. So we'll go to the next slide. That, how we were articulating what we were doing evolved even further, and is something, we described this, Min and I, in a relational research presentation that's also part of the dialogue series that the Taos Institute has. So that's been recorded, and I will be providing links to this presentation as well, so you can have even more of a sense of it. In addition, there was a chapter in Social Construction and Action that Min and I published that again outlines some of the underlying sort of aspects of the approach that we think can be adapted in lots of different ways using lots of different arts-based media. And then we'll go to the next slide, if we can here. This is a point in time in the project when we, Flux had actually exhibited twice in Edmonton, once at DC3 Art Projects, a gallery that's well respected. And that was where it was unveiled, had its premiere. Then an aspect, a different, in slightly different form, it was also exhibited within the University of Alberta Hospital's art gallery called the McMullen Gallery, which is a really, really interesting opportunity to, it was one of the first times artwork that was challenging, not just sort of pastoral or, you know, and actually that's not being really fair. But there was concern at the art gallery at different points in time around having art that might be somewhat challenging of people who are already experiencing, you know, suffering and different conditions and concerns and worries about their health and how they were going to do as they were moving through diseases and various illnesses, etc., that would lead them to hospital or to visiting family and friends in the hospital as patients. So this now is at a point where the work was exhibited at the International Museum of Surgical Science in Chicago. And we took that as an opportunity as well to have a symposium. And what was interesting about that, and these are some of the talks that went on, was that it provided an opportunity for many of us who were involved in the project to actually share what our experiences were. We've been so busy doing things and writing about it and presenting, but to have that day just to hear again new insights, new perspectives, the sharing that occurred there was really, really helpful. At this time, we did have the book that was being prepared for publication. The book wasn't originally, there was an idea that we might have a book, but it was the exhibition that we were for sure working directly for. And then the opportunity came about to actually propose the book to, and we decided to go to the University of Alberta Press. They supported it, and we put that together. We can go to the next slide. Here, you can have a sense of just what a collaborative effort this was. This was a bit challenging when the book went to reviewers. First of all, it was difficult to find reviewers, so that delayed publication of the book. The people that felt that they could actually speak to what they felt they authoritatively, what they should look like, because it's a bit of a hybrid. It's a catalog of the work. It includes artist statements, a curatorial essay, and Lianne, who curated the Flux exhibition, will talk more to that process and to the artworks in just a minute or so. And but it also documented the process of the project. So Min has an introductory essay. It also includes essays and contributions of others who are involved with the project. They're including our patient partners who have essays and contributions. And in addition, there was an essay that I wrote that helped to situate the book, the project, etc., in terms of health research or a general public audience, in terms of trying to translate understandings in ways that would be impactful. And so people would be more responsive potentially to the work. The reviewers, when they finally did come through, they thought this was really, really interesting, but felt that it might be helpful to, change the order of some of the essays to help people understand what they were getting into or what they were experiencing. And one important suggestion was including a project timeline. So people had a sense of, yes, this looks amazing, but how did you actually do this? And so that's something that we've included as well in the book. The next slide gives a sense of and this is going to be really difficult to read. And these are all screenshots, so the resolution isn't great either. But let me just give you a sense. We have the foreword from Min, a preface. I've got the introductory essay, expanding relational possibilities through collaborative streams of inquiry and dialogue. Then the middle book is actually called Influx, and that includes the curatorial essay, along with all images of the artworks by the artists and artist statements. Then there's an afterword that talks about research creation for social change, and then the project timeline. So that's what the book looks like. And we can go to the next slide. And this is an example, a little bit of the project timeline that just sort of outlines all of the different sort of steps. And much of this evolved over time. It was emerged, new possibilities. And that was a really wonderful aspect of this project as well. It was a real privilege to be involved in this project and to continue to be involved, and it continues to evolve. Min currently has led the introduction of a living stories framework that provides a platform for the sharing online of different works that are projects, initiatives at the intersection of arts and medicine, with a view to sharing different kinds of knowledge that aren't just available through text. And I think that's it for me. We'll get a real sense of the book now from Lianne. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Pam. So my name's LianneMcTavish, and I am in the Department of Art and Design. And I was invited to become part of the project. And this project was collaborative from the beginning to the end. There were workshops where the team members met clinicians and patient participants and various other members, including the artists. And we met several times. We heard the patient stories. And one of the main outcomes that was planned from the beginning was to have artworks created and to bring in professional artists to make work that would help to convey the stories and just to be open-ended and to share the experience. So my role was, in addition to participating in this process and learning a lot about head and neck cancer, was to help to curate the exhibition. So I'm going to mainly talk about that, and I'm going to show you some of the artworks. I'm just starting here with the poster that was designed by Baha Harmouche that was advertising the show at DC3, which was the first version of the exhibition, and there were 2 others after that. The name of the show was called Flux, Responding to Head and Neck Cancer, and the term flux was chosen, again, the whole group discussed it, because it's kind of an ugly word, it's a strong word, and it has multiple meanings. It's very open-ended. A flux, it has a kind of medical connotation. It can be positive, right? A cleansing, a release, but it can also be dangerous if there's too much, right? It's unstable, it's fluid, it's changing. So this wide open sense of the word, and that the image and the experiences about head and neck cancer that we were wanting to share were not positive stories of heroic triumph over illness. It was more about what Min was talking about, the everyday, the continuing challenges, the fears and the anxieties, as well as some positive elements. So I did want to start by talking about what is curating, because having the role of curator is, to define that role is quite challenging, and to explain what curating is also challenging, especially now when the term is used so broadly. The term curating is used, I was thinking of some recent references of curating I came across, and one was at a restaurant. This was before the pandemic, of course. It said, "We will curate your cheese plate. We will select your cheese." Another one was at a laundromat, and it said, "We will curate your laundry." So the word curating is used, curate playlists. It's used so broadly now and in this popular way. And I was trying to understand, what does this term mean? And it seemed to be selecting. It seemed to be associated with just picking things out. More than that, though, it was also this sense of trust me, I can choose for you. I have a kind of authority or knowledge. And I think that's how it's used in popular culture. Now, sometimes curators, so professional curators who work in galleries and museums, aren't very happy with that popular conception of curating, because they feel that it, not all of them, but some have complained it undermines their authority and the training and what curating actually is, and the knowledge it's based on, and the work and the effort that happens, and that it diminishes it as if it's just picking things out, going to artist studios and picking things out. Part of the reason they may have been a bit defensive about this popularizing term is that curating is, you can have training in it, you can get degrees in it, but really it's not necessary. It's not actually a fully professionalized position. And there are many ways you can come to be a curator, but key to all of them is practice, right? You have to do it. You have to go into galleries, you have to work with creators, makers, designers, and artists. And you have to know a lot about a whole range of things. So the curating that I've done in the past was sometimes based on knowing people, following their work, working with artists for decades, and then helping them bring their shows to fruition. In this case, it was different, right? This was a very collaborative project where you had artists working with clinicians, working with humanists, working with patient practitioners. So it's a particular collaborative kind of production of the knowledge, and it was collaborative at every stage. So there were, this is Kyle Terrence made a video that was at the entryway of all of the exhibitions to kind of help people when they were coming to see the artworks, to help them understand like what had happened. And this is a screenshot of the early workshops, and they were run by David Diamond, who did this kind of theatrical, we would act out and work together to act out certain concepts. So you see some of our patient practitioners here, including Bernie Krusky, who's on the call, and Kimberly Flowers. So this was, for the artists to be here and for me to be there was new, right? I have never worked with patients before, and it was a steep learning curve. It was really overwhelming and could be emotional and also very challenging. I know that for the artists to make work in response to this they felt a great responsibility, right? They weren't just going to translate literally these experiences, they needed to convey them and to be respectful, and then to have something that would really convey the experiences. Here's the group of us standing at the exhibition in Chicago. So that's the third exhibition, and you can see Min there, you can see Pam and me, and then some different artists too. So just to give you a sense again that this is a group effort. So I am going to talk about a few of the works that were made, starting with this work by Jude Griebel. And Jude is a sculptor. He makes multimedia work. And so he was, again, at all of the workshops, presenting work, engaging with patients. The creation of the work was shared with everyone before it was finished, right? So it was ongoing. And then when I did visits, studio visits, a lot of the times different patient participants would come with me, right? So they were involved the whole time. It's not a top-down process. This work is called Obstructed, and it was made in 2016. It's quite a large work, and it shows a figure on a bed, so clearly referencing the medical context. But this is a mountain man. You see how it's kind of this craggy man. And what's happened is that there has been, this work is by Jude, and there's Jude standing holding a drink at the opening. I just wanted you to see him there. Some of the other artists are here too. This is in Chicago. But to give you a detail, here is the head, and you can see that there are these tracks that run through this mountain man, and there has been an accident. So there's been a rock slide, and it's a kind of catastrophic event that has stopped circulation. Something has stopped and slowed, and there is this accident. So what Jude is doing here is showing this illness as a kind of catastrophe, and you can see he's put it up around the neck as well. And the figure here, Jude was responding to the sense of diagnosis, right? There's this catastrophe, this horrible event, things have stopped, and the figure is waiting, right? He's waiting. He's active, right? He's not passive, but he's still waiting for care and intervention. So this is sort of alluding to head and neck cancer as a kind of natural disaster, but within a medical context that requires care. So that this sense of waiting was one of the things that became clear in the discussions, just this waiting for something to happen and kind of anxiety about it. But this is an active, hopeful scene as well, because he's kind of strong, he's a mountain, you've got the clouds, you get a sense of that this figure will persevere. Here's the installation. So this installation, this first one, is in DC3, the first exhibit, and then I'm showing you in Chicago. And I wanted you to get a sense of the way the works look different in different spaces and the sheer just all the decision-making and effort to ship the work, to install it, to get grant funding to do this, all of that is part of curating. And all of that was also collaborative. Yeah, so here's the work also in Chicago, and you can see other artworks that I'll talk about in a minute, but you get a sense of the context and the space. And here's the opening. So it was we had a huge turnout. It was very exciting in Chicago during the opening, and everyone's there talking about it, and it was open for quite some time. And a lot of people did see this show. Okay, so here's another overall view of the show in DC3. DC3 is a big warehouse type space, and there's bright light, and it looks very different in this work. But here I'm focusing on Ingrid Bachmann's work. So Ingrid is an artist at Concordia University, lives in Montreal, and she has long worked with issues of the body and medical concerns. She had a more poetic response, I would say, not more poetic. She had a poetic response to the stories she heard, and she made a number of works. So she didn't feel she could just make one, right? She had to make multiple works to try to respond to all of this information she was learning about. And one were these sculpted heads, and they show tracheotomy scars, and they have this sense of treatment, right, of intervention. So now beyond the diagnosis to treatment and intervention, she wanted these figures to be rough clay, to show her hand, to show the making and the care she had made in forming them. The way they're lying down has a kind of anatomical connotation, but they're not. They're artistic works, right? They're artistic responses. And here's the installation in Chicago. In Chicago, we were having a tour of the International Museum of Surgical Science, and in the storage area, we saw a beautiful case. And so Ingrid said, let's use this case and put the heads in here, along with another one, which is a neck with a balloon beside it. This kind of hopeful balloon that's referencing medical treatment as well. So there's the beautiful installation in Chicago. You can see she also made these drawings, and they show the scars, right? They show the interventions, but there's also hope there. You see the flower coming out of the tracheotomy scar, and the balloon now is upright. It's this celebration, but not really. So there's these nuanced references to after treatment, there is permanent change, right? It's not that life just goes on normally, but there's hope, right? She's referencing that. Here's Ingrid there pointing and talking about the work at the opening. So of course, the reason for making these works is to share them and to have people look at them and think about them and talk about them and maybe think about head and neck cancer differently afterwards. This work is hard to show. This is Jill Hoyu's Veil's absolutely beautiful work. So Jill, of course, was involved from the beginning as well, as were all the artists. And she made these works that she calls veils in Mylar. And she was inspired to do this after visiting. Part of the process was to have these visits to, I'm forgetting the name of it.
Institute of Reconstructive Sciences and Medicine.
Thanks, Min. And so there, she was in a medical facility looking at like how these surgeries were planned and seeing the effort, seeing the scans, and she was inspired by that to create this beautiful work with razor blades.
And she had an experience with the haptic program that actually simulates the surgical process.
Okay. Oh, thanks, Min. That's great. So this might be a better slide to show how gorgeous these works are. So Mylar is quite a rigid material, thin. And what Jill did is she used razor blades and she cut out in this meticulous, labor-intensive way images inspired by the scan. So I think you can see it in this one, the jaw bone, but you can also see the incredible labor here. And what she wanted to do was to convey, now we're talking about treatment again, right? Not diagnosis, but the interventions and the artistic side of the surgical work. Because often these cases of head and neck cancer require innovative, like surgical procedures. And she was conveying this notion of the surgeon and the other medical practitioners and clinicians as artists, right? Trying to work and do their best to help the patient. So here we have these beautiful works that hung basically on the wall in the shadowy way, and you had to go very close to them to see them, and they have this lace-like quality. In the show in DC3, she had a beautiful display of all the razor blades she had used because it just took so much time, and I think that the element of time is also key. We see that in other works too, like in Jude's work, the waiting, and in Jill's work, the sheer time that it took to make these works is conveyed. We couldn't send these to the show in Chicago because we were shipping works over the border. So we were not really wanting to bring all of these razor blades into the United States. Here is the work made by Sean Colefield called Familiar 2016. So I hope you're getting a sense of just how diverse these works are and how different artists responded working with the members of the team and with patient practitioners the whole time. Sean made work that's actually a bit different for him. He's a printmaker and he often makes works that are really large woodcuts. In this case though, he used found photographs and he reproduced them on these plexiglass squares that he then placed on ledges. And so they actually lean back. There's Sean. So I wanted you to get a sense of the scale and also see the artist who made them. He's at the University of Alberta in my department as well. So here's a detail. They're these domestic scenes. They look like, you know, images from the 70s. And he wanted to address, take a look at this one though while I talk. He wanted to address sort of the way in which care happens in a domestic setting, in a family setting, and the way in which small things become important. So he has flowers alluding to mortality, right? It's not that direct, these allusions to care in the home and to the family. And here are some images of, I don't know if anyone on the call can recognize them, but they are images of cancer cells. So he has this scientific element, and in a way, these plexiglass squares kind of remind me of these scientific specimens. And then the display, right, the grid-like display kind of echoes this scientific management of, or attempt to manage this illness. And so Sean is, it's not a direct message, but it's alluding to domestic care, the presence of illness within the home, and mortality. Here is Brad Necyk, and he was working with Pam and just completed his PhD. Pam, do you want to say anything about that? He won the Governor General's Award for the work that he did, and Pam was his supervisor. But his work, now again, very different. He works a lot with digital media, and he is shown here in the show that was installed in Chicago. But here's the installation in Edmonton at DC3. So you can see that there are a number of screens, and they're backlit as if on light boxes, alluding to medical imagery. But it's images that Brad made by using a rototool cutter, and he had different patient practitioners sit in front of a green screen and then just kind of move at will. And then he cut out thousands of little pieces and he made them move. And it's hard to convey this without showing a video, so I just did this. Like they move around and they're floating around and they're kind of disturbing in a way. But at the same time, they never really cohere into a complete face. So here he's alluding to, again, the surgical intervention, but also the disruption of identity. That was another key theme that came out in the discussion of head and neck cancer with the people who had gone through the surgeries and were recovering from them. The face never quite comes back to the same place it was before, and identity shifts and those struggles around that. The other thing that comes through in this work is the continual change, right? It's continually moving, and you get this sense of this process that's ongoing. It's not that the treatment happens, there's recovery, and then life goes on. It's this continual process. And then the last work I'll talk about is by Heather Huston, she responded to a different part of the stories that we were learning about. And it was more about after, right? Again, afterwards, after all of the diagnosis, the treatment, the struggle, in terms of social life and how the patient practitioner or patient participants would describe how everything was changed afterwards, how a lot of them could not participate in family meals anymore or going out. Nothing was simple. Eating and drinking were quite difficult, as Min was already describing. So Heather wanted to respond to that, and she made these tables. There's the installation in Edmonton with these plates. So there are images of a male and a female figure, and they're overlaid. You saw that in the poster, actually. Baha chose this image for the poster with marks, right? These medical kind of marks mapping out the body, this kind of screening of the figure. The figure's no longer clearly visible. And then these tables are separated. So the sense of isolation, even when they're side by side. And then the plates on the, oh, there's a better image of the figures. The plates on the table are these sort of restaurant grade plates that Heather has then printed, these hands that are reaching out, like they're just reaching out, but it's a bit vague what's happening, reaching for connection. You get these natural elements too. And there's this sense of attempts to re-enter social life that are thwarted and not quite happening. So I can stop there, and I know that we hope we have plenty of time for discussion and questions. I'll stop sharing.
Lianne, we have a question from Darian. If you look at the chat, you can see the whole question, or we can have Darian come on and ask the question.
I think it'd be nice to have Darian come on if she's willing. Hi, Darian.
Hi, thank you so much for those presentations. This is a topic that I'm extremely interested in, working in collaborative teams. And my question really stems from this. I guess at the beginning of the process, what were the risks that you all identified in working with sensitive topics like illness and cancer? And how did you structure the project in order to mitigate these risks? And did things occur in process that could not have been anticipated ahead of time that you really had to negotiate in process? And that goes for all the presenters who are here.
Pam or Min?
You want to start, Min?
Sure. I think you've really identified one of the key things that really arose early on in our process around how we were going to engage. And so one of the questions that we had to collaboratively discuss as a large group was, what are we actually doing? Are we translating these sensitive topics and giving a voice to them? Is an artist going to work solely with one patient and so-called translate that experience? And the thing that we came up with as a collaborative group was, we don't want to actually just communicate one specific lived experience, because that does become such a sensitive and personal experience. But rather what we did as part of our process, including working with David Diamond, was to take a collective understanding about the different things that were arising around this experience of head and neck cancer, that then again, right, as shown in our title, that then we could now respond to. And so a lot of the artwork that you see as part of our project are responses to the stories that were shared and the experiences that were shared by our patients. And some of the risks that I think you're trying to get at were, so as an academic, I'm always asked to provide outcomes and evaluations and what are you trying to accomplish by this? What's the next step? And I really had to articulate to the academic people, our faculty evaluation committees, that aside from traditional metrics, that there wasn't going to be any evaluation of the art. And I even proposed to Lianne and the artists, is there some way that we can actually, capture impact? And through much dialogue, it was identified that no, that's not what we do in terms of art, that it's a process of creating dialogue and open-ended engagement. And so again, there's a lot of risks that come with being involved in such a project. In terms of patients, I think as part of our process, we really came to the table as equals. Nobody was the expert, not the academics, not the clinicians, not the patients, nor the artists. We came in all with different perspectives and different expertise. And by engaging in that initial process of the theater that Lianne had alluded to, that really gave us a platform to create mutual trust and understanding with a standard, level playing field. So I'll ask Pam and Lianne to expand.
I'll just make mention of, I think that was a really important component, the applied theater workshop with David Diamond, insofar as none of us were wildly comfortable necessarily with theater. So we're all sort of equally vulnerable to the process in that way. So I think that helped to create that level playing field where we're coming in. It was also wonderful. The first part of that workshop, the Friday evening, was just coming together to talk a little bit about the project and just to sort of mingle. Min had conducted interviews with a number of patients, some who didn't come out to the workshop. It was just an invitation. There was no need to commit to the project at that point, just to come together to learn even more through the applied theater work that David Diamond was going to be doing. But we wanted to just introduce the possible patient partners to the artists. So wonderful posters of the work that the artists had done in the past, what sort of their philosophy or approach was. We're all on these posters that you could just sort of walk up to and as you'd like and take it in. But we did that also. Posters were created of different themes that were coming out of the interviews that Min had created, so that even the artists could kind of just walk over and kind of get a little bit of a sense of what the issues and challenges were.
Hi.
Yeah. I think one.
Can you hear?
Yeah, go ahead. Oh, sorry. And then I just wanted to kind of expand on that point, Pam, in terms of the workshop, but and Lianne might speak to this as well. We had several workshops throughout our process, and some of the artwork was shown as a preliminary showcase to our patient partners. And
you want to show me? Okay.
A lot of our reactions
put it back.
As clinicians and as researchers was to really push against some of the images and the work that had been created. And Lianne, do you want to expand on that in terms of Brad's work that was initially shown, and
Right.
maybe even asking Bernie his own perspective and reaction? Because I think that that's probably what Darian is probably asking for.
Right. I think that the risk for the artists was that they felt responsible for conveying someone else's experience, and this is not their normal way of working. So they took a risk in accepting that invitation. I have to say, the early workshops with the theater, I was pretty uncomfortable with that, and that was a good thing. Everyone was uncomfortable. But when Brad in particular made some early work, it was graphic, right? And it was faces, and it wasn't attractive. It was about suffering, and it was about surgical intervention. And so he was a bit nervous about showing the patient participants that during the second workshop. And we were all kind of nervous about that. And then when it went up on the screen and the discussion happened, the response was very positive, because the goal wasn't to tell a heroic story or an aesthetically pleasing story. The goal was to convey, right, the experience of head and neck cancer. But I can turn it over to Bernie if he'd like to add anything. Or not.
Yes, he'd like to join in.
Okay, great.
I was just
They can probably understand you. It's okay.
I was just saying that seeing an image portrayed by an artist is having a moment of joy and beauty compared to like myself have facial disfigurement.
Did everybody catch what he was saying? Just he wanted me to repeat what he's had said, that it was quite an experience to I'm going to paraphrase because I don't remember exactly what he said, but it was a joy to see something come out that was beautiful and meaningful and portrayed the pain and suffering he'd been through and the other patients had been through, where people could see it and put some kind of an understanding towards what was happening to these people, to patients and the families. And just one other thing I'd like to put in is that in the first David Diamond theatrical experience, because head and neck cancer patients are often very isolated, it was quite an emotional experience to come together with other people that had gone through this too.
I would also add that Heather's artwork, the title of it, I Am Naked, and I said, and what I've realized is why I said it is working with the artist. I lost evidence of shame that I had about my condition.
Right.
Thanks, Bernie. I just wanted to give you a sense of, I think you can see my screen, but this is one of the initial works that was shared with our patient group as part of our preliminary works workshop. And they're graphic, they're horrific, and our initial reaction across the board was, no, you cannot actually show any of this. It would be traumatic. And
that might have just been you and me, Min.
No, actually, Jana and a lot of the other clinicians that I had shared that with, we just said, no way. And what we heard then was from our patients that these were exactly the stories that were never told, never shared, and never understood. And that these were the things that needed to come out and be articulated and discussed. So I just wanted to give everybody a sense of some of that.
Mm-hmm. Lianne, you might want to talk to about how the process that you suggested, that was just so wonderful too, about involving the patients in studio visits, and then when the exhibition occurred, how patient partners and were involved in touring things as well.
Right, and that was a unique experience for me as well. Typically, curating involves visits, studio visits, and it's a process. You go back multiple times and you see the work developing and you have discussions. So it's not just going in and picking things out, but for a number of these visits, different patient participants came and saw the work in process. And I think that was really important for people to see the process of making this work, how carefully it was done, how it changed over time, and for the artists to get the feedback, often reassuring feedback, but also some, advice, and the sheer time and labor and work of putting together an exhibition is something that I think came out through the process. The different aspects of it, getting the money, the paperwork, the negotiations with galleries, working with different groups, the actual install and how much skill and labor is required, the decisions that are made on the fly, the uncertainty of it. That's one thing that I think might have been a surprise for people not involved, maybe not Darian, but like the sheer uncertainty, and you just have to trust that everything will be okay. It's quite last minute. Things happen. Like putting a show in is quite a stressful experience, and it's years of labor. And I think that it was great to have more people brought into that process, because that labor kind of disappears. When you go to a gallery and you see the show, the process of making it, the decisions, the way it's arranged, all the years of work aren't really there for people to see.
I'm just noting, we've got additional questions as well. What were the responses of the patients? This is a Germain, and perhaps you want to ask that question yourself. And but looking at the chat, the relationships that grew across people who might not have met, this is amazing, and learn from one another's perspective. Have we received further stories from patients' experiences as they might also continue in their journeys as the project itself came into completion? That is described in the book. A number of the patient partners talked about how they experienced this. There's, I'm just blocking. Yes, Leslie shared, she wrote the preface, and essentially something that she shared with us early on was, she asked Min, what was the purpose of this? And Min had shared, well, we want to change people's understanding and help to transform what this experience is all about. She goes, well, good luck with that.
So no, I mean, a lot of the hesitation came not only from patient partners and their families, but also from the artists and the academics. There was a lot of question in terms of this project and what it would look like and what would come out of it. But specifically with our patient partners, we've maintained a relationship that has, continued to evolve and grow over the years. And I'm sure Bernie and Pat can speak to this, but we've had so many different opportunities to celebrate developments within each other's lives. Bernie will tell you stories about his daughter and her various productions that are going on, but there really was this development of a relational, I guess a relationship had evolved through the process. And that is one of the things that we talk about within one of our essays, is actually the relational aspect of this research itself. And it's interesting because Bernie and Leslie and Pam and the different participants that shared their stories have also come back to us and said and shared the impact that the work and the engagement process itself has actually had on their own lives. So for example, in Edmonton, we didn't have a head and neck cancer support group that was formally developed. And in the last a year and a half, they've actually combined their resources and their efforts. And now we have an official not-for-profit head and neck cancer support group, which really was founded by the members of our project team. So that just kind of shows you how they've formed relationships and how we have now formed relationships. And I think that's kind of what Jiming has asked. And if we haven't answered your question, maybe we can just, you can come on and help us understand better. Yeah. Bernie, did you want to say anything at this point around that?
That's in the clinical literature on cancer, and especially head and neck cancer, the issue of the one sense of
Identity.
self is a major issue. Who am I? Now I have a 24 inches in on my body, surgical incisions. So it's led to this question. So when this project started, I was who had multiple surgeries. A year ago or so, I was featured in a cancer magazine and they sent a photographer to do a photo. Well, it was many photos. So what I wanted was an award photo of me. Now, in terms of personal identity, you're just me. And then 4 or 5 years after, you're featured winning photo. Who could ask for more than that?
Mm-hmm.
I think that there were just so many transformative aspects to the project. A challenge we faced is that it has exhibited 3 times, and we somehow imagined it would continue to exhibit, and it hasn't at this point. And that was something that I think we've documented it in the book, and I really encourage everybody to experience the book as well. It'll provide a lot of additional layers, but experiencing it in person is also really an impactful aspect. We introduced at point response cards because people would be just responding to the work. We wanted to invite them to share a response, and so we did that. I don't know whether we did it at DC3. There would have been other ways. We did that at DC3 as well.
Yeah, we had various ways of engagement. So at DC3, we had kind of like a mini survey talking about, familiarity with head and neck cancer, familiarity with contemporary art, just different ways of capturing that. And then at the McMullen Gallery, we had people post just their reactions on index cards and post them on a billboard type process. And then at IMSS, the International Museum of Surgical Sciences, we had little reflection cards with various prompts that people then submitted. So various ways of engaging and prompting for reflection.
I wonder, Lianne, if you might have a thought about virtual exhibitions. What possibilities that are, given our current experience of COVID, for example, where we're not able to as easily get out and about, and but how can an exhibition like this continue to live on and continue to engage audiences?
I think that was something that was a challenge, is that we wanted people to have a firsthand experience of the artworks. The materiality, the physicality of them cannot be replicated virtually. So it was really important to have those exhibitions. And part of the practice of art history and design is that you can't experience the work in the same way virtually. At the same time, when you have these exhibitions, they're so labor intensive. They cost a lot too, right? You can't, so shipping it across the border, installing it, the openings, the events, flying there, like it's so expensive to do it. It's so important to do it, but maybe a virtual component could supplement it. I think the book actually does that. I think the book can circulate and keep the exhibition living, but that is a challenge. And maybe there's people in the group who can speak to that too, because it's hard to know. And now with the pandemic, of course, I've been experiencing art mainly virtually for the past 4 months. I don't find it as satisfying, but I think there are some ways that people are using virtual reality, AR, doing all these things to kind of make it more effective. But maybe there's someone else who can say like how to manage this problem of the expense and the short duration of an exhibition versus the very different experience of the works virtually. I know we have artists in the group here.
This is Dr. Eugene Myers speaking. Have been listening very intently and carefully to your this program. I came across it through the C.F. Reynolds Historical Society at the University of Pittsburgh School of Medicine. It's I don't know about now, but it was at one time the biggest medical history society in the country. And so it's an interesting topic that you're on. And I spent about 40 years of my life with a very busy head and neck surgical practice here at the University of Pittsburgh. I was for many years chairman of the department here, and estimated that I did about 9,000 operations for head and neck tumors of one sort or another. And the patients in general, Bernie will have to excuse me maybe, but head and neck patients are a very special group of patients. They're not like any other patients that I've ever come across, and I'm sure that you must have picked that up early on with your exposure to the head and neck group. And one of the things I wondered about with your support group is whether you had been in touch with SPONC. SPONC is has dozens of support groups in the U.S. I don't know about outside or Canada, but we have a dozen. SPONC is a mnemonic for support group for patients who have oral cavity and head and neck cancer. It was started about 20 years ago by a woman by the name of Nancy Leupold, who had gone through a very extensive radical resection for cancer of the oral cavity. And she cried her way through a year of surgery and recovery and radiation and so forth, and vowed that she would never let anybody do that. And so she started a support group, a SPONC group. And so, like I say, there are dozens of SPONC chapters all through the U.S. And I was wondering whether your group had ever been in touch with them. Here in Pittsburgh, we also have a newer support group, more specialized. It's called Face to Face, and it's a support group for patients who have facial disfigurement, not just from head and neck cancer, but also trauma, burns, things like that. And so there are these other groups, and I was curious, number one, as to whether you had been in any contact with them, and second thing is whether what role did the surgeons play in this project that you did? I noticed a distinct absence of surgeons this morning on your program.
So just to thank you, Eugene, for joining us. Just to give you a sense of the head and neck cancer support group, I'm sure there was some awareness of spunk and even face-to-face, but I can't speak to that personally. Bernie, you might have a better grasp on that. But I do know in Canada, Edmonton actually has one of the most advanced rehab surgical institutes. And so the fact that we were so advanced advanced in our rehab, but not able to support the patients and their care afterwards, there was a serious gap. And so henceforth the need for a support group. In terms of your second question, Eugene, was, sorry, I'm having lapses of brain. What was your second?
Surgeons.
Oh,
Had to
the
do with
surgeons.
the surgeons, involvement of the surgeons.
Yeah. Interesting that you noticed that. So we
I've been a surgeon all my life. How wouldn't I notice it?
Yeah, no. Well, we had reached out to many surgeons, and we have a great team of surgeons here. But again, that is one of the challenges that we faced in terms of getting their engagement for the duration of the process, because they are so busy. But we did actually have consultations and collaborations in terms of understanding the work that they did. So when we went to IRSM, which is our Institute for Rehab Sciences and Medicine, we had some of their engagement. We understood what their facilities look like. And so we had some engagement in that way, but unfortunately we didn't have their engagement throughout the entire process. But, we had some input and consultation with them. But unfortunately, no, you're absolutely right. They weren't as part of our formal team.
One of the entries in the book involves Dr. Suresh Nair and Bernie Kruski, who together shared their perspectives. Dr. Nair, or Suresh Nair, is a prosthodontist.
So he does some surgery, but more related to oral, dental. Yeah.
But that was a really lovely contribution that Bernie and Suresh put together, really reflecting the relationship and the care over time, the different concerns and the balancing act. The entry was called a High Wire Act, but it brings that perspective of the healthcare provider, the surgeon, so intimately involved with the reconstruction.
The other thing you might want to know, well, probably know about, sounds like you did a very thorough job, is the so-called survivorship clinic. That's a new and growing area of popularity in our field. And what it does is that it combines in one place at one time a clinic using a physician and a nurse and all of the ancillary help that you could want to have with patients, like with Bernie. I'm sure he spent many hours with a speech language pathologist, and using his valve and changing his valve and fishing his valve out of the toilet bowl and et cetera, et cetera. That's the way it is. And so the survivorship clinics now, we have one here at the University of Pittsburgh, which has about more than 1,000 patients. And the advantage of it is that if you're doing this out of your clinic and a patient comes in, they're having trouble swallowing, which is one of the major problems. Probably I don't have to explain to Bernie about that. And it's a big deal. But then to go and try to find a speech pathologist or a swallowing center to help with that is pretty difficult. So what the survivorship clinics have really done is to try to put under one roof the disparate group of ancillary health individuals who are professionals and very, very important, not only to monitor the continued survival, but also to pick up on the odds and ends of things that patients many patients experience in the aftermath of their treatment, especially as years go by, some of the radiation effects and so forth become apparent and create mischief for the patients and need to be taken care of. So that's another area you might want to know about.
Great.
So Pam, there's another question from Alan Bloom. He's got some ideas there and then a question. I don't know if you've seen that.
This last question here.
Yeah.
About art can inspire, but so can patients themselves with their own stories. I've devoted most of my career to the prevention of cancer, giving the keynote address at the launch for Physicians for Smoke. Many of my patients with laryngeal cancer and oral cancer have been helpful and inspirational working with the next generation to prevent head and neck cancer. Have you thought about using the exhibition for such educational opportunities? We are hoping to respond to whatever opportunities there might be for exhibitions. MIN's worked closely with different organizations, and we'd be happy to respond to other any opportunities that might arise from this. Reach out to us. That'd be great.
Yeah, and just to kind of further on education, even I think targeting youth and smoking interventions is a fantastic platform to share the work. But we've also been sharing some of the work related to the project with dental and dental hygiene students, because that's where I'm housed, in terms of the importance of screening, early detection. And so by giving stories and experiences and the significance of early detection, using some of the materials that have been developed through the exhibition is another way that we've been trying to utilize the project and the materials from the project as an educational opportunity. But I know that there are many other opportunities that can really overlap with that, even from a medical program or even the surgical programs. So we're really open to those opportunities.
Bernie'd like to put a little 2 cents worth in.
Pardon. I have a strong mental health background. Prior to diagnosis. So, as a result, the GP in the political sphere. But for me, first of all, is there is so much information already about how to cope with cancer. It's not accessible to patients. Number one, surgeons have limited of time. My surgeons give me with an hour and a half. That's the norm is much less. Secondly, the literacy of cancer is very low. Result, if you give them material, they don't understand it or they don't absorb it. But the Dr. Nutter, while I was undergoing a dental implant, an advocate, what we do now is for new patients awaiting reconstruction, reassemble them, and he introduced me in front of patients And what was it? How long did it take? 2 years. Gas to have implants. The other fall, he introduced me in front of and are using the same. But my point is, remove the scratch the surface in the area of education. Remove the just touch the tip of the earth a lot more. And this is not to fault surgeons, clinicians, and academics. We need this to on knowledge translation.
I appreciate. Oops, Pat, were you going to say something? Oh.
Go ahead, Pam, and then I'll respond to Darian's question.
Oh, okay. I was wondering, Pat, if you were if I had interrupted you and you were going to say something. No, okay. I think that similar to what Eugene had shared and Bernie talking about, and I think you're going to follow up around the difficulties in terms of time and commitment and the different pulls that everybody has in relation to what their commitments are and daily lives are like, which is sort of similar to how we all started when there was some nervousness coming together for me. I was worried, the artists were going to relate to their art world concerns. We had patients and their families who were dealing with all sorts of things. We had concerns as health researchers or in the health domain in terms of scholarship and research as well. How could we balance all of these different pulls and challenges and do well by it? And somehow we managed, similar to Bernie and Suresha's essay topic, it's a high wire sort of dance. But I think Darian had a really excellent question here, and you're going to follow up with this then that relates to this as well. Lianne.
Right. Darian asked about the time constraints, especially on the surgeons who were not able to participate the entire time. And everyone has a lot of time constraints, and there's demands for outcomes, and including in art and design, it's just different kinds of outcomes. And one work that I think addressed this was a work I didn't talk about in the PowerPoint. It was by Ingrid Bachmann. It's called Something I've Been Meaning to Tell You, and it's a sound piece. And it's this kind of hand-molded shape upon a shelf, and there's this strange sound coming out of it. Is it laughing? Is it crying? What is it? You have to lean in and really pay attention. And she was drawing the viewer in, or the visitor, to think about taking the time to stop and listen, taking the time to understand what the person recovering from head and neck cancer was saying, making that effort, and drawing attention to the sheer time and investment it takes to do that work and the value of that time. So I think that issue of time came up in multiple ways, and everyone is doing all these different things, but that particular artwork by Ingrid highlighted that people need to stop and take the time and listen. There is this huge pressure that became clear to me, especially on all the clinicians, that they needed to have some kind of numerical outcome to prove something that's not quite the same. I mean, it's increasing, right? It's increasing in arts and humanities that we have to somehow measure and prove that there was this outcome that was had an impact, but it's so hard to measure impact of, the patients, the people who came to the show. When I was there at DC3, people drove in from other parts of the province to come and see this show because they had gone through head and neck cancer treatment, and their responses and their emotional responses. How do you measure that?
I remember being at being involved with another exhibition, and somebody shared at the outcome of that, you will never be able to capture all of the outcomes, all of that this has meant, that all that will have changed because of what people have experienced through this process and through those who are viewing the work and making meaning and understanding of it. So it doesn't lend itself to metrics in a way. Yeah.
So we are coming to the end of our time together here on this Zoom call with the authors. And I just want to thank Lianne and Pam and Min and everyone here for participating, and for the team for sharing their story, and Bernie for sharing your story, and invite you to continue the conversation if you wish with the authors online. And I posted a link there to our Taos Institute online learning community website. It's a Ning community. You need to click on that link, and you'll register yourself, and then you can click on the page that's specifically for this conversation on the book. And Pam offered to post a lot more resources on that page, so you can continue delving into some of those resources. And just thank you so much to the authors for this book and this project that's just so meaningful and important work. So thank you, thank you.
Thank you. This will be recorded, and then this will be available to share with other people too, if you know of others who might be interested in learning more about the project and the work, etc.
Yeah, I'll post this recording on that same learning platform for this conversation, so you can get it there. All right.
Thank you everyone for your wonderful questions, and all will be reviewing comments that have been made in the chat as well. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.